The 2006 Lebanon War, also called the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah War and known in Lebanon as the July War and in Israel as the Second Lebanon War, was a 34-day military conflict in Lebanon, northern Israel and the Golan Heights. The principal parties were Hezbollah paramilitary forces and the Israel Defense Forces. The conflict started on the 12th of July 2006, and continued until a United Nations brokered ceasefire went into effect in the morning on the 14th of August 2006, though it formally ended on the 8th of September 2006 when Israel lifted its naval blockade of Lebanon, due to unprecedented Iranian military support to Hezbollah before and during the war. Some consider it the first round of the Iran-Israel proxy conflict, rather than a continuation of the Arab-Israeli conflict. The conflict was precipitated by the Zarach-Tula incident. On the 12th of July 2006, Hezbollah fighters fired rockets at Israeli border towns as a diversion for an anti-tank missile attack on two armored Humvees patrolling the Israeli side of the border fence. The ambush left 3 soldiers dead. 2 Israeli soldiers were abducted and taken by Hezbollah to Lebanon. 5 more were killed in Lebanon, in a failed rescue attempt. Hezbollah demanded the release of Lebanese prisoners held by Israel in exchange for the release of the abducted soldiers. Israel refused and responded with airstrikes and artillery fire on targets in Lebanon. Israel attacked both Hezbollah military targets and Lebanese civilian infrastructure, including Beirut's Rafik Hariri International Airport. The IDF launched a ground invasion of southern Lebanon. Israel also imposed an air and naval blockade. Hezbollah then launched more rockets into northern Israel and engaged the IDF in guerrilla warfare from hardened positions. The conflict is believed to have killed between 1,191 and 1,300 Lebanese people and 165 Israelis. It severely damaged Lebanese civil infrastructure and displaced approximately 1 million Lebanese and 300,000 -500,000 Israelis. On the 11th of August 2006, the United Nations Security Council unanimously approved United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 in an effort to end the hostilities. The resolution, which was approved by both the Lebanese and Israeli governments the following days, called for disarmament of Hezbollah, for withdrawal of the IDF from Lebanon, and for the deployment of the Lebanese armed forces and an enlarged United Nations interim force in Lebanon in the south. UNIFIL was given an expanded mandate, including the ability to use force to ensure that their area of operations was not used for hostile activities, and to resist attempts by force to prevent them from discharging their duties. The Lebanese army began deploying in southern Lebanon on the 17th of August 2006. The blockade was lifted on the 8th of September 2006. On the 1st of October 2006, most Israeli troops withdrew from Lebanon, although the last of the troops continued to occupy the border-straddling village of Gaja. In the time since the enactment of UNSCR 1701, both the Lebanese government and UNIFIL have stated that they will not disarm Hezbollah. The remains of the 2 captured soldiers, whose fates were unknown, were returned to Israel on the 16th of July 2008 as part of a prisoner exchange. Background: cross-border attacks from southern Lebanon into Israel by the Palestine Liberation Organization dated as far back as 1968, and followed the Six-Day War. The area became a significant base for attacks following the arrival of the PLO leadership and its Fatah Brigade, following the 1971 expulsion from Jordan. Starting about this time, increasing demographic tensions related to the Lebanese National Pact which had divided governmental powers among religious groups throughout the country 30 years previously, began running high and led in part to the Lebanese Civil War. Concurrently, Syria began a 29-year military occupation in 1976. Israel's 1978 invasion of Lebanon failed to stem the Palestinian attacks in the long run, but Israel invaded Lebanon again in 1982 and forcibly expelled the PLO. Israel withdrew to a borderland buffer zone in southern Lebanon, held with the aid of proxy militants in the South Lebanon Army. The invasion also led to the conception of a new Shia militant group which in 1985 established itself politically under the name Hezbollah, and declared an armed struggle to end the Israeli occupation of Lebanese territory. When the Lebanese Civil War ended and other warring factions agreed to disarm, both Hezbollah and the SLA refused. 10 years later, Israel withdrew from South Lebanon to the UN-designated and internationally recognized Blue Line border in 2000. The withdrawal also led to the immediate collapse of the SLA, and Hezbollah quickly took control of the area. Later, citing continued Israeli control of the Shabaa Farms region and the internment of Lebanese prisoners in Israel, Hezbollah intensified its cross-border attacks, and used the tactic of seizing soldiers from Israel as leverage for a prisoner exchange in 2004. All told, from summer 2000, after the Israeli withdrawal, until summer 2006, Hezbollah conducted approximately 200 attacks on Israel, most of them artillery fire, some raids and some via proxies inside Israel. In these attacks, including the attack that precipitated the Israeli response that developed into the war, 31 Israelis were killed and 104 were wounded. In August 2006, in an article in The New Yorker, Seymour Hersh claimed that the White House gave the green light for the Israeli government to execute an attack on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Supposedly, communication between the Israeli government and the U.S. government about this came as early as 2 months in advance of the capture of 2 Israeli soldiers and the killing of 8 others by Hezbollah prior to the conflict in July 2006. The U.S. government denied these claims. According to Jonathan Cook, the Winograd Committee leaked a testimony from Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert suggesting that Olmert had been preparing for such a war at least 4 months before the official Cassis B. The capture by Hezbollah of 2 Israeli soldiers from a border post on the 12th of July 2006. Abduction efforts in the year prior to conflict. In June 2005, an Israel Defense Forces paratroop unit operating near the Shabaa Farms engaged 3 Lebanese it identified as Hezbollah Special Force members, killing 1. Videotapes recovered by the paratroopers contained footage of the 3 recording detailed accounts of the area. Over the following 12 months, Hezbollah made 3 unsuccessful attempts to abduct Israeli soldiers. On the 21st of November 2005, a number of Hezbollah special forces attempted to attack an Israeli outpost in Gaja, a village straddling the border between Lebanon and the Golan Heights. The outpost had been deserted following an intelligence warning, and 3 of the Hezbollah militants were killed when Israeli sniper David Markovich shot a rocket-propelled grenade they were carrying, causing it to explode. From his sniper position, Markovich shot and killed a 4th gunman shortly thereafter. Beginning of conflict, Hezbollah cross-border raid at around 9 a.m. local time on the 12th of July 2006. Hezbollah launched diversionary rocket attacks toward Israeli military positions near the coast and near the border village of Zarat as well as on the Israeli town of Shlomi and other villages. 5 civilians were injured, 6 Israeli military positions were fired on, and the surveillance cameras knocked out. At the same time, a Hezbollah ground contingent infiltrated the border into Israel through a dead zone in the border fence. Hiding in an overgrown wadi, they attacked a patrol of 2 Israeli Humvees patrolling the border near Zarat using pre-positioned explosives and anti-tank missiles, killing 3 soldiers, injuring 2, and capturing 2 soldiers. In response to the Hezbollah feint attacks, the IDF conducted a routine check of its positions and patrols, and found that contact with 2 ships was lost. A rescue force was immediately dispatched to the area and confirmed that 2 soldiers were missing after 20 minutes. A Merkava Mk3 tank, an armored personnel carrier, and a helicopter were immediately dispatched into Lebanon. The tank hit a large landmine, killing its crew of 4. Another soldier was killed and 2 lightly injured by mortar fire as they attempted to recover the bodies. Hezbollah named the attack Operation Truthful Promise after leader Hassan Nasrallah's public pledges over the prior year and a half to seize Israeli soldiers and swap them for 4 Lebanese held by Israel: Samir Kunta, Nassim Nisr, Jahya Skaf, Ali Faratan. Nasrallah claimed that Israel had broken a previous deal to release these prisoners, and since diplomacy had failed, violence was the only remaining option. Nasrallah declared that no military operation will result in rescuing these prisoners. The only method, as I indicated, is that of indirect negotiations and a swap. In a 2007 article after the conclusion of the war, Haaretz claimed that it was a war initiated by Israel against a relatively small guerrilla group. Israeli response. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert described the seizure of the soldiers as an act of war by the sovereign state of Lebanon, stating that Lebanon will bear the consequences of its actions, and promising a very painful and far-reaching response. Israel blamed the Lebanese government for the raid, as it was carried out from Lebanese territory. Hezbollah had 2 ministers serving in the Lebanese cabinet at the time. In response, Lebanese Prime Minister Fouad Siniora denied any knowledge of the raid and stated that he did not condone it. An emergency meeting of the Lebanese government reaffirmed this position. The Israel Defense Forces attacked targets within Lebanon with artillery and air strikes hours before the Israeli cabinet met to discuss a response. The targets consisted of bridges and roads in Lebanon, which were hit to prevent Hezbollah from transporting the abductees. An Israeli airstrike also destroyed the runways of Beirut Rafik Hariri International Airport. 44 civilians were killed. The Israeli Air Force also targeted Hezbollah's long-range rocket and missile stockpiles, destroying many of them on the ground in the first days of the war. Many of Hezbollah's longer-range rocket launchers were destroyed within the first hours of the Israeli attack. Later that same day, the cabinet decided to authorize the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister and the deputies to pursue the plan which they had proposed for action within Lebanon. Prime Minister Olmert officially demanded that the Israel Defense Forces avoid civilian casualties whenever possible. Israel's Chief of Staff Dan Halat said, "If the soldiers are not returned, we will turn Lebanon's clock back 20 years, while the head of Israel's Northern Command Udi Adam said, "This affair is between Israel and the state of Lebanon. Where to attack? Once it is inside Lebanon, everything is legitimate, not just southern Lebanon, not just the line of Hezbollah posts." On the 12th of July 2006, the Israeli cabinet promised that Israel would respond aggressively and harshly to those who carried out and are responsible for today's action. The cabinet's communiqué stated, in part, that the Lebanese government responsible for the action that originated on its soil. A retired Israeli army colonel explained that the rationale behind the attack was to create a rift between the Lebanese population and Hezbollah supporters by exacting a heavy price from the elite in Beirut. On the 16th of July, the Israeli cabinet released a communiqué explaining that, although Israel had engaged in military operations within Lebanon, its war was not against the Lebanese government. The communiqué stated, Israel is not fighting Lebanon but the terrorist element there, led by Nasrallah and his cohorts, who have made Lebanon a hostage and created Syrian and Iranian-sponsored terrorist enclaves of murder. When asked in August about the proportionality of the response, Prime Minister Olmert stated that the war started not only by killing 8 Israeli soldiers and abducting 2 but by shooting Katyusha and other rockets on the northern cities of Israel on that same morning, indiscriminately. He added, no country in Europe would have responded in such a restrained manner as Israel did. Israeli air and artillery attacks on Lebanon. During the first day of the war, the Israeli Air Force, artillery and navy conducted more than 100 attacks mainly against Hezbollah bases in South Lebanon, among them the regional headquarters in Utah. 5 bridges across the Litani and Zahrani rivers were also destroyed, reportedly to prevent Hezbollah from transferring the abducted soldiers to the north. Attacks from land, sea and air continued in the following days. Among the targets hit were the Hezbollah headquarters in the southern suburbs of Beirut, as well as the offices and homes of the leadership, the compounds of Al-Manara TV station and Al-Noor radio station, and the runways and fuel depots of the Rafik Hariri International Airport in Beirut. Also targeted were Hezbollah bases, weapons depots and outposts, as well as bridges, roads and petrol stations in South Lebanon. 44 civilians were killed throughout the day. It was later reported that the Israel Air Force, after midnight the 13th of July, attacked and destroyed 59 stationary medium-range FAJR rocket launches positioned throughout southern Lebanon. Operation Density allegedly only took 34 minutes to carry out but was the result of 6 years of intelligence gathering and planning. Between half and two-thirds of Hezbollah medium-range rocket capability was estimated by the IDF to have been wiped out. According to Israeli journalists Amos Hale and Avi Zakharov, the operation was Israel's most impressive military action and a devastating blow for Hezbollah. In the coming days, IDF allegedly also attacked and destroyed a large proportion of Hezbollah's long-range ZDL-ZAL-2 missiles. All the long-range rockets have been destroyed. Chief of Staff Halutz allegedly told the Israeli government, "We've won the war." According to military analyst William Arkin, there is little evidence that the Israeli Air Force even attempted, much less succeeded in, wiping out the medium and long-range rocket capability in the first days of the war. He dismissed the whole claim as an absurdity and a tale. Benjamin Lambeth, however, insisted that it was far-fetched to suggest that the authoritative Israeli leadership pronouncements were not based on facts. He admitted, however, that there was persistent uncertainty surrounding the few known facts and figures concerning the alleged attacks. Anthony Kordsman believed that IDF probably destroyed most long and medium-range missiles in the first 2 days of the war, but acknowledged that these claims have never been validated or described in detail. Hezbollah long remained silent on this episode of the war. On the 6th anniversary of the Lebanon War, Hezbollah chairman Hassan Nasrallah claimed that Hezbollah had known that the Israelis were collecting information on the rocket platforms and launchers and managed to move them without being detected. Most of the locations attacked by the Israeli Air Force were therefore empty. American officials claimed that the Israelis overstated the effectiveness of the air war against Hezbollah and cited the failure to hit any of the Hezbollah leaders in spite of dropping 23 tons of bombs on its alleged headquarters bunker. Al-Mana TV station only went dark for 2 minutes after the strike before it was back into the air. The TV station was bombed 15 times during the war but never faltered after the first hiccup. During the war, the Israeli Air Force flew 11,897 combat missions, which was more than the number of sorties during the 1973 October War and almost double the number during the 1982 First Lebanon War. The Israeli artillery fired 170,000 shells, more than twice the number fired in the 1973 October War. A senior officer in the IDF Armored Corps told Haaretz that he would be surprised if it turned out that even 5 Hezbollah fighters had been killed by the 170,000 shells fired. The Israeli Navy fired 2,500 shells. The combined effect of the massive air and artillery bombardment on Hezbollah capacity to fire short-range Katyusha rockets on northern Israel was very meager. According to the findings of the post-war military investigations, the IDF shelling succeeded only in destroying about 100 out of 12,000 Katyusha launches, less than 1% of the total. The massive fire led to a severe shortage of ammunition towards the end of the war. According to Human Rights Watch, 51 combatants were killed in Israeli bombardments. Northern Command had prepared a list before the war on potential Hezbollah targets, identified by the Israeli intelligence, to be struck in case of renewed hostilities. By the 4th day of the war, the IDF ran out of targets, as all the 83 targets on the list had already been hit. A high-ranking IDF officer told reporters off the record that the Israeli Chief of Staff Dan Halutz had ordered the Air Force to destroy 10 12-story buildings in the southern suburbs of Beirut for every rocket that fell on Haifa. The statement was denied by the IDF spokesperson. Large parts of the Lebanese civilian infrastructure, however, were destroyed, including 400 miles of roads, 73 bridges, and 31 other targets such as Beirut's Rafik Hariri International Airport, ports, water and sewage treatment plants, electrical facilities, 25 fuel stations, 900 commercial structures, up to 350 schools and 2 hospitals, and 15,000 homes. Some 130,000 more homes were damaged. Hezbollah rocket attacks on Israel. On the 16th of July, 8 employees of the Israel Railways were killed by direct rocket hits on the Haifa train depot. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah defended the attacks, saying that Hezbollah initially had aimed its rockets on military sites only, but since Israel, he said, had systematically bombed civilian targets, he felt that Hezbollah had no choice but to answer in kind and target Israeli cities. The attack on the Haifa depot was not the first civilian target to be hit by Hezbollah. Civilians in the border communities were hurt in the initial cover fire on IDF positions for the cross-border raid. 2 Israeli civilians were killed in an attack near the Air Force Base at Mount Meron on July 14. Since Hezbollah rockets were not very accurate, it is unclear whether civilians were intentionally targeted in these attacks. After the attack on Haifa, however, Hezbollah made no attempt to cover this fact. According to a Human Rights Watch study, civilian Israeli targets were mentioned 4 times as often in official Hezbollah wartime communiques as was military targets. Hezbollah TV station Al-Mana warned both in Arabic and Hebrew specific Israeli communities for future rocket attacks. Similarly, Hezbollah sent text messages to warn Israeli residents to evacuate their homes to avoid being targeted by rocket attacks. Israel published an alleged range card for upgraded Grad rocket launcher placed outside the village of Shifan in the western sector of South Lebanon, issued by the artillery department of the elite Nasser unit of Hezbollah. This list included 91 targets, 56 of whom were civilian and 27 were IDF posts or bases. The military targets had 3-digit reference numbers while civilian targets had double-digit numbers. During the war, the Hezbollah rocket force fired between 3,970 and 4,228 rockets at a rate of more than 100 per day, unprecedented since the Iran-Iraq War. About 95% of these were 122 mm Katyusha artillery rockets, which carried warheads up to 30 kilograms and had a range of up to 30 kilometers. An estimated 23% of these rockets hit cities and built-up areas across northern Israel, while the remainder hit open areas. Cities hit were Haifa, Hadera, Nazareth, Tiberias, Nahariya, Safed, Shafra, Afula, Kiryat Shmona, Beit Shean, Carmel, Acre, and Malot Tarshiha, as well as dozens of towns, kibbutzim, moshavim, and druze and Israeli Arab villages. The northern West Bank was also hit. Israeli Defense Minister Amir Peretz ordered commanders to prepare civil defense plans. 1 million Israelis had to stay near or in bomb shelters or security rooms, with some 250,000 civilians evacuating the north and relocating to other areas of the country. After the high number of Lebanese civilian casualties in the Qana airstrike, Israel announced a unilateral freeze in its air attacks on Lebanon. Hezbollah then halted its own rocket attacks on Israel. When Israel resumed its air attacks on Lebanon, Hezbollah followed suit and recommenced rocket attacks on Israeli targets. Hezbollah rocket attacks also targeted and succeeded in hitting military targets in Israel. The Israeli military censorship was, however, very strict and explicitly forbade Israel-based media from reporting such incidents. The wartime instruction to media stated that the military censor will not approve reports on missile hits at IDF bases and or strategic facilities. A notable exception was the rocket attack the 6th of August on a company of IDF reservists assembling in the border community of Kfar Giladi, which killed 12 soldiers and wounded several others. Initially, Israel did not confirm that the victims were military but eventually relented. The 6th of August, 2 elderly Arab women in Haifa were killed, and an Arab man was mortally wounded by Hezbollah rocket fire. The day after, Hezbollah leader Nasrallah appealed to Haifa's Arab community to leave the city so as not be hurt. After the initial Israeli response, Hezbollah declared an all-out military alert. Hezbollah was estimated to have 13,000 missiles at the beginning of the conflict. Israeli newspaper Haaretz described Hezbollah as a trained, skilled, well-organized, and highly motivated infantry that was equipped with the cream of modern weaponry from the arsenals of Syria, Iran, Russia, and China. Hezbollah's satellite TV station Al-Mana reported that the attacks had included AFAJR-3 and ARAAD-1, both liquid fuel missiles developed by Iran. Ground war. Hezbollah engaged in guerrilla warfare with IDF ground forces, fighting from well-fortified positions, often in urban areas, and attacking with small, well-armed units. Hezbollah fighters were highly trained, and were equipped with flak jackets, night vision goggles, communications equipment, and sometimes with Israeli uniforms and equipment. An Israeli soldier who participated in the war said that Hezbollah fighters were nothing like Hamas or the Palestinians. They are trained and highly qualified. All of us were kind of surprised. During engagements with the IDF, Hezbollah concentrated on inflicting losses on the IDF, believing an unwillingness to absorb steady losses to be Israel's strategic weakness. Hezbollah countered IDF armor through the use of sophisticated Russian-made anti-tank guided missiles. According to Merkava Tank Program Administration, 52 Merkava main battle tanks were damaged. Missiles penetrated 22 tanks, but only 5 tanks were destroyed, one of them by an improvised explosive device. The Merkava tanks that were penetrated were predominantly Mark II and Mark III models, but 5 Mark IVs were also penetrated. All but 2 of these tanks were rebuilt and returned to service. The IDF declared itself satisfied with the Merkava Mark IV's performance during the war. Hezbollah caused additional casualties using ATGMs to collapse buildings onto Israeli troops sheltering inside. As a result, IDF units did not linger in any one area for an extended period of time. Hezbollah fighters often use tunnels to emerge quickly, fire an anti-tank missile, and then disappear again. On the 14th of July 2006, Hin's Hanat ASAAR-5 class corvette of the Israeli Navy suffered damage after being struck by a Hezbollah C-802 anti-ship missile. 4 crew members were killed during the attack, but Hin's Hanat stayed afloat, extricated itself and made the rest of the journey back to Ashdod port for repairs on its own power.